Izuku was getting revenge on Katsuki. As a man, few things could wound both pride and heart more than watching the woman he loved walk away with someone else. But for Izuku Midoriya, it wasn't just a blow to his pride, it was a dagger straight to his soul. Nozomi Kimura, the person he had loved the most, had betrayed him with the one person he could never forgive, Katsuki Bakugo. Every time he thought about it, his blood boiled. It was a pain he could not compare to anything else, a resentment that ate away at him from the inside. He hadn't just been deceived, he had been humiliated in the process. Flashback. The start of his final year in high school meant nothing to Izuku Midoriya. To him, it was just another year he had to endure before he could finally escape from everyone. He was the outcast of the school, the quirkless boy, the one with no future. His only goal was to keep a low profile and let time pass as quickly as possible. But then, his teacher introduced a new student. This is Nozomi Kimura. She transferred from another city and will be studying here. I hope you all treat her well. Izuku looked up and, for the first time in a long while, was left speechless. Nozomi had a captivating beauty, pale skin, hair as dark as the night, and eyes so intensely blue that they mesmerized him instantly. He felt his heart race but quickly suppressed that feeling. What was the point? He was a nobody in this school. There was no use in getting interested in someone like her. He chuckled bitterly to himself. He had no future in life, let alone with someone like Nozomi. But to his surprise, she was the one who, over time, decided to approach him. It all started during a break. As usual, Izuku sat alone, quietly eating an apple. Suddenly, Nozomi sat next to him, looking at him curiously. "Why are you always alone?" she asked naturally, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Izuku hesitated to answer, but seeing that she wasn't going anywhere, he sighed and decided to tell the truth. "Because I don't have a quirk. To everyone here, I'm just a waste of space. A useless nobody." Nozomi stared at him as if analyzing every word. Then she frowned. "That's stupid." Izuku blinked, surprised by her response. "You're not less than them just because you don't have a quirk. And they're idiots for treating you that way." For the first time in years, someone stood up for him. Someone saw him as a person and not as a joke. That conversation marked the beginning of something unexpected. From that day on, Nozomi made an effort to get closer to him, finding any excuse to talk to him. Izuku, though hesitant at first, eventually felt comfortable with her presence. He had found something he never thought he would have, a friend. Weeks passed, and their bond grew stronger. Encouraged by the new confidence she had given him, Izuku gathered the courage to ask her out. His heart pounded as he formed the words, fearing rejection. But to his surprise, Nozomi smiled sweetly and accepted. From that day on, his life changed completely. Nozomi became his light in the darkness, the reason he woke up every morning with a smile on his face. What he didn't know, was that the same love that had saved him would soon become the source of his deepest pain and the reason his perspective on everything would change. A few days after their first date, they made their relationship official. Izuku still couldn't believe that someone like her had chosen him, but Nozomi always showed him through both words and actions that she truly loved him. Now, all of his classmates looked at him with envy, though there were always whispers meant to stir trouble between them. "I can't believe she's kissing that loser," one of the girls in their class sneered as she watched Nozomi give Izuku a kiss on the cheek. "She must be with him out of pity, there's no other explanation," someone commented. "They'll break up in no time," another added with a mocking laugh. Izuku tried to ignore those comments, but it was difficult. Nozomi, on the other hand, would always take his hand and smile at him sweetly, disregarding the words of others. Despite everything, there was one thing that hadn't changed, Katsuki Bakugo. Whenever he had the chance, he and his two lackeys would pick a fight with him. Izuku knew these confrontations were inevitable, so whenever he sensed one coming, he would always tell Nozomi to leave first, coming up with any excuse. "Don't worry, I just have to take care of something at school. I'll see you later, okay?" he would say with a forced smile. She would look at him with some doubt but eventually nod. "Alright, but be careful." However, this time, her instincts told her something was wrong. Instead of leaving, she decided to go back for him. Izuku was in an alley away from the school. His breathing was heavy, his body ached, and there was a large burn on his shirt. Boom! An explosion echoed in the air, making him stumble and collapse to the ground. He clutched his side, feeling the searing pain in his skin. His frustration grew with every hit, with every insult. "Deku, I still don't get how someone like Nozomi could be interested in you," Katsuki sneered. The other one laughed out loud. "She must be with you out of pity. Come on, it's obvious a girl like that would never stay with a weakling like you." Izuku clenched his teeth and tightened his fists. He knew he couldn't do anything. He knew that if he tried to fight back, he would only get punished worse. Katsuki knew something that Izuku didn't, but his frustration over Nozomi still being with him only made him angrier. "That bitch should have chosen me instead of a worthless piece of trash like you." With that, he lifted his foot and pressed it against Izuku's chest, shoving him further into the ground. Izuku held back a groan of pain, feeling the sole of Katsuki's shoe digging into his torso. He couldn't breathe properly. Bakugo grinned in satisfaction, reveling in his superiority. But before he could continue his torment, the sound of hurried footsteps interrupted the scene. "Leave my boyfriend alone." Nozomi's voice rang out, filled with anger. Katsuki frowned and turned his head. Izuku, with effort, lifted his gaze and felt a strange mix of relief and concern upon seeing her there. Nozomi stood in front of them, fists clenched and eyes burning with fury. "Get away from him right now," she shouted, not caring that she was surrounded by 3 guys much stronger than her. Izuku tried to say something, but no words came out. He hadn't expected her to come back for him, to stand up to these guys without fear. Something inside him ignited, a mix of determination and long-restrained anger. He clenched his fists tightly, feeling his heart pounding furiously in his chest. With trembling hands, he gripped Katsuki's leg and, with unexpected strength, pushed him aside, managing to stand up, though unsteadily. His face was drenched in sweat, his clothes were singed, but his gaze was resolute. He took a deep breath and stepped in front of Nozomi, shielding her with his own body. Well, looks like you want to play hero, Deku," Katsuki spat with disdain before snapping his fingers. "Grab the girl, but don't hurt her, for now." Izuku felt a knot in his stomach, but before he could react and stop Bakugo's lackeys, it was Katsuki himself who delivered a brutal punch to his abdomen, making him fall to his knees. He gasped in pain, feeling the air forced out of his lungs. "Why, you bastard!" He groaned through gritted teeth, trying to stay on his feet. However, Katsuki gave him no respite. He grabbed him by the hair violently, forcing him to lift his head. Izuku blinked, dazed, and then his blood ran cold when he saw Nozomi trapped by Bakugo's 2 subordinates. Her expression was filled with fear, and her body trembled slightly. "Let her go, Bakugo. She's not the one you want." Izuku's voice carried more concern than anger. Seeing the terror in Nozomi's eyes was more painful than any blow he could take. Katsuki let out a laugh before leaning in and whispering mockingly, "That's where you're wrong, nerd. I do want her. She deserves to be my woman." Before Izuku could respond, a knee struck him directly in the nose, knocking him down violently. He hit the ground with a muffled groan, feeling blood trickle down his face as his vision blurred. Through the pain and dizziness, he barely made out Katsuki moving toward Nozomi, his hand reaching toward her chest. "Stop, Bakugo!" Izuku exclaimed desperately, trying to crawl toward him. "I'll do whatever you want, just let her go." Nozomi sobbed, her tears falling silently. Izuku felt a sharp pang of helplessness in his heart. His body ached, but nothing could compare to the torment of seeing her suffer like this. However, what he didn't know was that those tears weren't just from fear, but from an overwhelming guilt, a secret that, if revealed, would shatter him completely. Katsuki looked at him with a twisted smile. "Ha! So, you'll do whatever it takes to save your precious girlfriend, huh?" Izuku lifted his head and met his gaze with determination. "Whatever it takes. Then get on your knees and beg for my forgiveness. Beg like the pathetic Deku you are." "Stop, Bakugo. You're taking this too far." Nozomi cried out through her tears. But suddenly, Bakugo gave her a knowing look, a look only she understood. Her lips trembled, and in an act that left Izuku stunned, she lowered her gaze and bit her lip, as if trying to hold something back. Izuku, not fully understanding the situation, gathered what little strength he had left and, swallowing his pride, fell to his knees before Bakugo. "Please, let her go." His voice, though broken, remained steady. Katsuki let out a cruel laugh, savoring the moment, then mockingly stepped forward. "If you really want me to let her go, then lick my shoes and apologize like the insect you are." Izuku clenched his teeth in fury. Every fiber of his being screamed at him not to do it, to stand up and fight, but Nozomi was in danger. With no power to protect her, all he could do was obey. If he defied Bakugo, he feared what they might do to her. With his gaze filled with restrained hatred, he lowered his head even further. Then, with trembling lips, he leaned in and licked the tip of Bakugo's shoe. "Please, forgive her and let her go." Bakugo and his friends burst into laughter, their cruel and humiliating voices echoing through the alley. Izuku remained on the ground, his mouth filled with bitterness and his chest burning with helplessness. Nozomi also stayed silent, avoiding his gaze, and without saying a word, she turned around and walked away, leaving him there. Izuku clenched his fists tightly, feeling bile rise in his throat. Something inside him wanted to scream, but he swallowed it down along with his dignity. A few minutes later, Nozomi found Katsuki in a secluded corner of the school. This time, he was alone. "Why do you have to bother him like that?" she asked, her voice filled with anger. Katsuki smirked arrogantly and stepped closer, sliding an arm around her waist. "Come on, babe, I was just joking. You know I'd never hurt you." She pressed her lips together, trying to pull away. "You said that if I was with you, you wouldn't mess with Izuku anymore." Katsuki shrugged indifferently. "Come on, between the two of us, you're no saint either, are you?" His voice dripped with mockery. He leaned in, pressing a kiss to her lips. Nozomi resisted at first, but then she lifted her hands, wrapped them around his neck, and deepened the kiss. In the distance, a group of students watched them. One of them raised his phone and captured the moment with a malicious grin. "This is gold. Haha, that idiot Midoriya is really a loser for getting cheated on." The next day, Izuku felt strangely numb. With his face resting against his desk, he stared out the window, waiting for the day to end quickly. Feeling something cold against his cheek, he lifted his head and found Nozomi's sweet smile as she offered him a soda. "Silly, it's break time already. Let's go eat." Izuku smiled back at her, though inside, the weight of the previous day still lingered. As they walked through the hallways, he began to notice the whispers around him. Poor thing, he really thinks she loves him. It'll be fun to see his face when he finds out the truth. The laughter surrounding him made his body tense. Then he felt a vibration in his pocket and pulled out his phone. A message had arrived from an unknown sender with an attached photo. Who could it be? He muttered to himself. He tapped the screen to open the image. His heart stopped. Right in front of his eyes, he saw Katsuki kissing a girl. Even though she had her back to the camera, Izuku recognized her instantly. It was Nozomi. His fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He shook his head. It couldn't be her. Nozomi knew what he had been through, she knew how much he hated Katsuki. She wouldn't betray him like that. Nozomi turned to him with concern. "Izuku, are you okay? You look pale." Izuku forced a smile, hiding his shock. "I'm fine, Nozomi-chan." At the end of the day, he watched as Katsuki left first. Then his girlfriend approached with a nervous smile. "Izuku, I have to help my mom with some things today, so I'll be leaving early. Sorry for not waiting for you." Izuku, though doubts had begun creeping into his mind, couldn't stop his love for her from clouding his judgment. With determination, he leaned in to give her a kiss, their first one. But Nozomi turned her face away at the last second, causing his lips to only brush against her cheek. She felt terrible seeing the hurt in Izuku's eyes, but the guilt was eating away at her, and she couldn't bear the thought of kissing him. "Izuku, I think it's still too soon for a kiss," she murmured, unable to look at him. Without offering further explanation, she left. Izuku stood still, a growing weight pressing against his chest. Something was wrong, and he felt like he was about to face something that would change him forever. Pushing aside his depressing thoughts, he started cleaning the classroom. As he picked up the last few papers from the floor, a figure appeared before him. One of his classmates, someone who never bothered him but never spoke to him either, stood by the door. Her long red hair framed both sides of her face, with a ponytail resting against her chest. But the most striking thing about her was her yellow eyes, deep and unreadable. She observed him with an expression he couldn't decipher. "Hello, Maikima-san," Izuku greeted, surprised by her sudden appearance. "Hello, Midoriya." Her voice was soft, but there was a subtle hint of danger in it. She walked toward him with a calculated smile. "You know, I heard a rather amusing rumor about your girlfriend." Izuku clenched his fists. He knew what she was about to say, but he didn't want to hear it. "Leave if you have nothing important to say." Maikima smirked and, with a swift motion, grabbed his tie, pulling him slightly closer so their faces were mere inches apart. "But, Midoriya, what I have to say is important. Do you really not want to know?" Izuku closed his eyes for a brief moment, then met her gaze directly. He couldn't keep running from reality. "Tell me what you know." She seemed pleased with his response. "But, Midoriya, you do realize that nothing comes for free, right?" Izuku gritted his teeth. Of course he knew. More than anyone. His life had never been easy. Everyone spoke ill of him, but what hurt the most was how they harassed his mother at work for giving birth to a useless son. He hated himself for that. "What do you want?" Maikima narrowed her eyes, her smile sharpening. There was a dangerous undertone in her voice as she replied, "I want you to be mine. I want you to be my man, and I'll be your woman. I don't care if you have other women in the future, just remember that I'll be the one in charge." Izuku looked at her in confusion. "Why would you ask that from someone with no future like me?" Maikima smiled with her eyes closed, concealing the truth. No one knew about her ocular abilities. One of them allowed her to see a person's destiny on a scale of 1 to 100, and in her entire life, she had never seen anyone with a number as high as Izuku's, 99. If she claimed him, she knew her life would be secured. But there was no need to tell him that, so instead, she replied, "Midoriya, maybe you don't see it, but I believe you'll become a great hero. Besides, I find you very attractive. Perhaps if you get rid of that timid personality and take what you want without fearing the consequences, you'll become quite the ladies' man." Izuku felt a lump in his throat. Wanting to be a hero had always been his dream, but his chances were slim. However, what shocked him most was hearing someone call him attractive. Not even Nozomi had ever said that. He closed his eyes for a moment before making his decision. "If that's what you want, I'll be your man. I'll be yours. Now tell me everything you know about Nozomi." Makima's eyes gleamed with a dangerous spark as she slowly released his tie. Then, with an air of absolute confidence, she extended her hand toward him. "I hope you understand, Midoriya. Once you accept, there's no turning back. You'll belong to me, and your heart will be in my hands." Izuku hesitated for a moment. A knot twisted in his stomach, as if he were standing on the edge of a cliff. But the image of Nozomi with Bakugo was burned into his mind, making his blood boil with rage. With a determination born from pain, he grasped her hand firmly. Makima's smile widened. "Now that you're mine, I'll treat you kindly. And it's time to get revenge on that bitch, Nozomi." Hours later, in a secluded park, far from prying eyes, Nozomi and Bakugo sat on a bench. Their lips met in a deep kiss, but after a while, she pulled away. Every time she was with Bakugo, the image of her boyfriend appeared in her mind. That innocent smile, those eyes filled with love for her, they suffocated her with guilt. Is it really worth risking everything for him, she thought, biting her lip with uncertainty. At first, it had only been a game. A flirtation, a false promise that if she gave in, Bakugo would be more lenient with Izuku. But little by little, the desire and the need to feel something different dragged her into this betrayal. Bakugo smirked when he saw her expression. "What's wrong? Don't tell me you're not enjoying being with a real man." His arrogant tone dripped with amusement as his hand shamelessly slid over the curve of her backside. Nozomi laughed softly, trying to mask her discomfort. "Hee, it's not that, baby. I was just a little distracted, that's all." The blonde frowned and pulled his hand away. "TCH, don't tell me you're still thinking about that damn nerd." She quickly shook her head, laughing nervously. "Of course not. Izuku is just a loser, although I do kind of feel bad for him." Bakugo smirked with satisfaction, leaning back against the bench with his arms crossed. Just imagining Izuku's face when he found out the truth excited him. The humiliation, the helplessness, it would be glorious. Suddenly, Nozomi's phone vibrated in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a message from Izuku. "Love, I want to see you. Where are you?" Her heart clenched for a moment. She hesitated, unsure of what to reply, but Bakugo noticed and, with a swift movement, snatched the phone from her hands. He, so the damn nerd wants to see you. What a shame, because right now, you're with me." She frowned and yanked the phone back, her hands trembling as she typed a response. "Sorry, I'm at home, and I'm really tired." Bakugo wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her roughly against him. His warm breath brushed against her neck as his hands slid down her waist without restraint. A shiver ran through Nozomi's body. "You're mine, beautiful. Stop thinking about that idiot," he whispered as he grabbed her phone and snapped a picture of them together, his hands roaming freely over her body. She immediately pulled away, fear flashing in her eyes. "Delete that picture." Bakugo let out a laugh, but his expression hardened instantly. "Relax. I won't show it to the nerd, unless you give me a reason to." His gaze darkened as he leaned closer, his voice dripping with cruel amusement. "But tell me, what are you so afraid of? Do you regret it?" He smirked, his words laced with mockery. "Because you remember that you chose me, right? You even gave me your first time, and that idiot hasn't even kissed you." Nozomi lowered her gaze. She couldn't deny it. Bakugo clicked his tongue, irritated. "I'm out of here. I'm bored." Without another word, he turned and walked away, not even bothering to look back. She was left alone, wrapping her arms around herself as an overwhelming emptiness spread through her chest. From the shadows, Maikima watched the scene with a malicious smile. Izuku stood beside her, trembling with rage. His fists were clenched so tightly that his nails dug into his palms, and his face was streaked with tears, but his eyes burned with an uncontrollable fury at what he had just witnessed. Maikima gently took his chin, forcing him to look at her. With a sly smile, she leaned in and kissed him. The sudden contact startled him, but the anger consuming him was so intense that he barely reacted. "Since that foolish girl didn't appreciate it, your first kiss is mine now," she whispered, licking her lips with satisfaction. A shiver ran down Izuku's spine as his heart pounded furiously. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. "Tell me, do you want to make her suffer?" Makima's voice was seductive as she traced her fingers along his cheek. Izuku looked at her without hesitation. "Yes. I want to see her on her knees, regretting what she did to me." Maikima placed her hand on his chest and smiled with malice. "Good. That look of anger and determination suits you, Midoriya. It makes you look really sexy." Her voice dropped to a dangerous whisper as she leaned in closer. Slowly, she ran her tongue over the tip of one of her fingers in a provocative gesture, savoring the tension in his eyes. Then, with ease, she took his hand and led him away. "Come on. The revenge starts now." Nozomi felt uneasy. Days had passed, and her boyfriend, the one who always looked at her with love and searched for any excuse to talk to her, had become distant. Every time she suggested going on a date, the response was always the same. "Sorry, Nozomi, but my mom needs help with something." At first, she accepted it without question. After all, she had used that excuse before. But too many days had gone by. Something didn't add up. She tried not to overthink it, but even when they did talk, he seemed to be in another world. That day, while working on a class project together, she decided to ask him directly. "Baby, something is wrong with you." Her voice was sweet as she leaned in slightly toward him. Izuku barely lifted his gaze from his notebook. "It's nothing. I just found out something I never expected." A chill ran down Nozomi's spine. Her body tensed, and alarms went off in her mind. "Something?" She tried to keep her voice steady, but a slight tremor gave her away. Izuku looked up and gave her a gentle smile. "Don't worry, it's nothing important. Just remember, as long as you're okay, I'll be happy." For a moment, she relaxed. She convinced herself it was all in her head. But then, when Izuku turned to look out the window, his reflection sent ice through her veins. Those weren't the warm, gentle eyes of her boyfriend, it was a look of pure rage. A silent, restrained hatred she had never seen in him before. "Baby, why did you go quiet?" His voice pulled her back as he looked at her again. She quickly swallowed and lowered her head. "It's nothing, nothing. I just thought we should focus and finish this assignment quickly." But inside, her heart was racing. Was it just my imagination, or was that really hatred in his eyes? She tried to convince herself it wasn't directed at her, but fear settled in her chest. Yes, she had betrayed him, but it had all started as a way to protect him, at least, that's what she told herself. Somewhere along the way, though, she had lost control, but it was too late to turn back now. Katsuki had too much evidence, and if she left him, he would make sure Izuku found out the truth. She loved Izuku, and she knew that if he ever discovered her affair with Katsuki, he would probably leave her. But she couldn't bear the thought of losing him. The walk home after school felt heavier than usual. They walked in thick silence until Nozomi finally spoke. "Izuku, I love you, but I feel like you're slipping away from me." Her voice trembled slightly as she stopped and looked at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty and fear of his response. Izuku gently wrapped his arms around her. "I'm sorry. I've just been going through something that's been hard to process." Nozomi relaxed in his embrace and sighed, feeling relieved. "Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I'm just being paranoid," she thought. What she didn't see was the shadowed look in her boyfriend's eyes. Izuku didn't believe a single word she said. To him, Nozomi was no longer his sweet girlfriend but a liar who had spit on and trampled his heart. When they pulled apart, Nozomi leaned in, trying to kiss him. She still remembered Katsuki's words about how she had never kissed Izuku before. But to her surprise, he turned his face at the last second, and her lips only brushed against his cheek. She froze, unsure of what to do. "Why?" Izuku forced a smile. "Baby, you were the one who said it yourself. It's still too soon. And I think you're right." His phone vibrated with a message. He pulled it from his pocket and glanced at the screen. "Sorry, my mom needs me for something." Without another word, he quickly walked away. Nozomi watched as he took a different route than usual, her heart pounding with nervousness. She shook her head, trying to calm herself. "He wouldn't betray me, right?" She wrapped her arms around herself, repeating that thought over and over. Even though she had cheated on him. In her mind, it was inconceivable that he would do the same to her. "If I were you, I wouldn't be so sure." Her heart skipped a beat. She turned quickly, searching for the source of the voice. Maikima stood there, a mysterious smile on her lips. Nozomi wanted to ask what she meant, but before she could form the question, Maikima simply walked away with her usual graceful stride, leaving behind a lingering air of uncertainty. The same situation with her boyfriend repeated itself over the next few weeks. Nozomi kept trying to talk to Izuku, suggesting dates, anything to bring things back to normal, but he only responded with short, vague excuses. "Sorry, Nozomi, but my mom needs help with something." Always the same excuse. At first, she thought it was just coincidence, but it had happened too many times now. Still, she couldn't complain. She had used that same lie on him before. The weight of paranoia began to take its toll on her. She felt more unstable with each passing day. She kept telling herself that everything would be fine, that Izuku was just going through a rough patch, but the guilt was eating away at her from the inside. Then, her birthday arrived. It was the perfect opportunity to spend time with Izuku and rekindle their relationship. Or at least, that's what she hoped. In class, the teacher asked the students to share their future aspirations. Shouts of, "I'm going to be a hero," filled the classroom, overflowing with enthusiasm. Everyone spoke about their dreams with passion, except for Izuku. He remained silent, his expression blank. When the teacher mentioned that Katsuki had applied to UA, Nozomi felt a wave of disgust. How could someone like him even dream of becoming a hero? But what left her frozen was what came next. "Midoriya, you applied to UA too, didn't you?" A heavy silence filled the classroom before it exploded into laughter. "Please, he doesn't even have a quirk. He's going to fail the entrance exam. Maybe they'll let him in as a cheerleader. That would be the only real thing he's done in his life. Unlike his relationship." Nozomi felt a chill crawl up her spine at that last comment. In the past few weeks, someone had leaked that she and Katsuki were together. She hoped and prayed that Izuku hadn't believed the rumors. Suddenly, Katsuki stood up abruptly, his brow furrowed in pure fury. "You damn nerd, how dare you apply to UA? I'm going to be the only one from this shitty school who makes it." Without warning, an explosion formed in his hand and struck Izuku directly, sending him crashing against the wall. Nozomi clenched her fists, rage surging through her. What had been the point of all this? She was supposed to be with Katsuki to keep him from hurting Izuku, yet the bastard wasn't keeping his end of the deal. Then, a soft but confident voice echoed through the classroom. "Come on, everyone. Who says he can't get into UA?" Silence took over the room. The laughter died instantly, and Katsuki turned his head toward the source of the voice, scowling. "Maikima. What the hell do you think you're doing?" The red-haired girl stood up gracefully, her expression unreadable. The teacher was about to intervene, but she looked at him with her intense golden eyes, which, for a brief moment, shimmered slightly. "You should stay quiet." The teacher, with a hint of fear, nodded silently, not daring to argue. Maikima walked calmly through the classroom, a small smile playing on her lips. Her stride was elegant, each step resonating with unshakable confidence. She stopped beside Nozomi, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Because, unlike all of you, I believe Izuku will achieve his dream." Then, she leaned in closer, her piercing golden eyes locking onto Nozomi's, as if she could see straight into her soul. A chill ran down Nozomi's spine. "And unlike all of you." She paused briefly, making sure Nozomi didn't look away. Her lips curved into a subtle but menacing smile. "I wouldn't betray him." Straightening up, Maikima walked away just as calmly as before, leaving Nozomi frozen in place, a hollow feeling settling in her stomach. Her mind replayed those last words over and over, knowing they had been meant for her. Maikima crouched down and placed her hands on Izuku's shoulders, helping him sit up. "I'm taking him to the infirmary." It wasn't a request, it was a statement. No one dared to object, not even the teacher. Before leaving the classroom, Maikima turned back and met Nozomi's light blue eyes, which were now trembling and filled with fear. At the end of the school day, Izuku walked alongside Maikima, both deep in a conversation that seemed important. Not far away, his girlfriend watched them closely. The moment Maikima noticed her, she smirked and bid Izuku goodbye with a kiss on the cheek. Nozomi quickened her pace, stepping in front of him. Her expression was serious, but her voice betrayed the discomfort she was trying to hide. "Since when are you two friends?" "As far as I know, she barely interacts with the class." She crossed her arms, waiting for an answer. Izuku didn't even blink. "Do I owe you an explanation?" Nozomi opened her mouth to reply, but he wasn't finished. "I heard you've been meeting up with Bakugo. Have I ever confronted you about it?" The silence that followed was suffocating. Nozomi felt her heart pounding, unable to find the words to respond. Izuku, on the other hand, smiled naturally. "My parents gave me some money today. What do you think about using it for a date to celebrate your birthday?" Nozomi blinked in surprise. She hadn't expected that response. Her face lit up instantly. This was her chance to save their relationship, and she wasn't going to waste it. They spent the afternoon at the mall. They ate together, watched a movie, and wandered through various stores. On the surface, they looked like a happy couple, but Izuku's smile was nothing more than a mask. His mind was focused on something much darker. Tonight, he would sever their bond in a way Nozomi would never forget. Sitting on a bench, they enjoyed their ice cream when Nozomi's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, and her expression shifted. Izuku immediately noticed the guilt in her eyes. "Izu, wait here for a bit, I have something to take care of." Izuku simply smiled. "Sure." Nozomi quickly walked to a more secluded corner of the mall. When she arrived, she saw Bakugo waiting for her with a playful expression. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Bakugo?" she grumbled, crossing her arms. Bakugo let out a laugh. "Is it wrong that I want to see my girl?" He stepped forward and grabbed Nozomi by the waist. Annoyed, she pushed him away with a slap. "Not today, Katsuki. I want to spend the day with my boyfriend." The blonde smirked mockingly. "Well, that's not what you said last night in my room." Nozomi pressed her lips together, feeling trapped. Bakugo grabbed her chin and kissed her. She cursed herself for not resisting. She knew if Izuku found out, it would all be over. 2 hours later, she ran back to the bench. She felt relieved to see Izuku still there, but guilt gnawed at her. "I'm sorry, babe. I got distracted by a store, and time just flew by." Izuku didn't respond immediately. Instead, he pulled out a wrapped box and handed it to her. Nozomi's eyes sparkled with excitement as she received it. "Babe, what's inside?" she asked, shaking the box and listening to the sound of things moving inside. Before she could open it, Izuku looked at her intently. "Honey, do you have something to tell me before you open your gift?" She paused for a moment and smiled nervously. "Heh, I guess I haven't thanked you yet." Izuku looked away for a moment. Something was off, but Nozomi dismissed the thought. She ripped the paper off eagerly and opened the lid. Inside, she found a love letter. Her heart raced as she read it. It was beautiful, talking about how much Izuku loved her and how important she was to him. But then, her eyes stopped at the date. The letter had been written weeks ago. Izuku watched her expression and spoke. "I wrote that letter some time ago. I wasn't planning on giving it to you. It was more of a diary where I wrote about how much you meant to me." Nozomi smiled, but also grew concerned. "Why do you say it like it's in the past?" Izuku finally looked her in the eyes, and his voice, cold and cutting, made it clear how much he despised her. "Because the woman I loved was never real." Nozomi felt her heart stop. Her body froze, as if the air itself had become too heavy to move. "Babe, what are you talking about?" she stammered, nervously laughing, desperately holding on to the hope that all of this was a misunderstanding. Izuku didn't respond immediately. He just looked at her with those green eyes, devoid of the warmth they once had. "Check your gift." Trembling, Nozomi lowered her gaze and continued searching the inside of the box. She pulled out a thick envelope. Her hands shook as she opened it. Dozens of photographs spilled into her lap. In them, her image was captured in moments she couldn't deny. Stolen kisses. Secret touches. Days when she had told Izuku she was busy, but in reality, she had been with Katsuki. Nozomi felt a blow to her chest, as if the air had left her. Her throat closed up, and her fingers clenched around the photos. She tried to speak, but only a choked gasp escaped her mouth. She shook her head, desperately, as if doing so could undo the reality. "This isn't what it looks like. Babe, you don't understand." Her voice cracked, almost pleading. Izuku raised his hand, silencing her instantly. "Of course I understand." His voice was firm. "The woman I loved betrayed me. It's that simple." Nozomi felt a knot tightening in her chest, but what Izuku said next took her breath away. "But tell me something. Why him? Out of everyone, all the options. Why did you choose the worst guy to betray me?" Nozomi tried to stand up to embrace him and beg for forgiveness, but before she could even move, she felt heavy hands on her shoulders, holding her in place. A warm breath brushed against her ear. "You haven't seen the best part yet." The shiver that ran down her spine was immediate. Maikima leaned in with a smile as elegant as it was cruel, sliding a phone into Nozomi's hand. She looked down and saw a video file flashing on the screen. "Maybe you'd prefer to watch it in private," Maikima murmured, offering her headphones. Nozomi hadn't seen the video yet, but she knew what she was about to witness would destroy her. With trembling hands, she put on the headphones and, holding her breath, pressed play. The sound of laughter filled her ears, all from familiar voices. "Huh, I can't believe she lets herself get caught so easily," someone said mockingly. Nozomi's world shattered. She recognized that voice. Her stomach twisted as the video played, and then, Bakugo's voice echoed with a coldness that froze her blood. "Look how she spreads her legs for me. And the best part is she doesn't even know I filmed it." Her breath became erratic. No, it couldn't be real. The laughter of the other boys sounded like knives against her skin. Nozomi yanked the headphones off and turned off the phone, feeling like she was going to vomit. She didn't dare look at Maikima. Not at the others around her. She just desperately searched for Izuku's gaze. He was standing apart, looking at her with an expression of disgust. Of repulsion. It was the same look she had caught in fleeting moments when he thought she wasn't looking. Those cold, calculating expressions she had always ignored, assuming he just had problems at home. But now she understood. Those looks had always been for her. "Babe, please. Let me explain." She clung to the bottom of her shirt, pleading. "I did all of this to protect you." Izuku stepped closer. Before she could react, he grabbed her shirt, pulling her toward him with such force that she let out a small, strangled scream. His face was too close. His eyes, inhumanly cold. And then, he spoke. "Explain to me, Nozomi, the only thing I want to hear from your mouth is that you admit how pathetic you are. Because that's what you are, right?" Nozomi's tears fell harder. "You're a liar. A hypocrite. You said you loved me, but as soon as you saw the opportunity, you ran into someone else's arms." Nozomi shook her head frantically. "That's not true." Izuku shook her lightly, forcing her to stop talking. "How does it feel, Nozomi?" His voice grew lower, almost like a poisonous whisper. "How does it feel knowing you were just a pastime? A joke for Bakugo and his group? Just another body on their list?" Nozomi bit her lip until she tasted the metallic tang of her own blood. "And to think I used to look at you like you were the best thing in my life." Izuku let her go abruptly, as if touching her disgusted him. Nozomi fell to her knees, trembling. "You're pathetic, Nozomi. And the worst part is, you're still lying to yourself." Izuku didn't wait for a response. He turned around and began to walk away, leaving Nozomi with a face soaked in tears, her heart crushed by an agony she had never felt before. Her world had collapsed, her lies exposed, and the person she loved the most now looked at her with endless contempt. Maikima, who had witnessed everything with a satisfied smile, took her time to savor the image of Nozomi breaking down in tears. "You told him everything, didn't you? This is all your fault," she sobbed, trying to find someone to blame. "No, no, darling." Makima's voice was sweet, with a false tone of compassion. She knelt down and gripped Nozomi's face with her cold, firm fingers. "This is all your fault." Nozomi shuddered. Her tear-filled eyes looked at her desperately. "I just wanted to protect him. I really love him." Maikima tilted her head, her yellow eyes flashing with coldness. "You really think Izuku needs protection?" "Of course he does." Nozomi screamed in a hysterical tone. "He's useless without a quirk. This world would have swallowed him alive if I hadn't done anything." Around them, murmurs began to rise. "Did you hear that? She fooled him and still says she loves him. What a hypocrite." Maikima didn't even dignify them with a response. With a simple turn of her head, her golden eyes fixed on the crowd. In seconds, as if an invisible force controlled them, the people dispersed in silence, returning to their business as if nothing had happened. Then, she turned back to Nozomi with a wolfish grin, tilting her head slightly. "You let a diamond in the rough slip away, darling. But don't worry, Nozomi. Izuku is in good hands. And those are mine." Nozomi's eyes widened in horror. "You're a bitch," she murmured, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and fear. Maikima grinned even wider, her eyes gleaming with a dangerous gleam. "I order you to never get near Izuku again. From now on, you can only look at him from a distance, longing for what you lost. Live the rest of your miserable existence as the shadow of a nobody, without dignity." Nozomi felt a shiver run through her body. "No. I don't want to," she sobbed, trying to resist her quirk. But Makima's eyes glowed even brighter. "It's an order. Do you understand?" Nozomi's body tensed, and even though her heart screamed in rebellion, her lips moved on their own. "I understand." Days passed, and the story began to unfold differently than in the anime. Izuku rescued Katsuki from the mud villain, but not with the intention of saving him. He did it just to see his expression of humiliation, to show him that the Deku he had always despised was now stronger than he could have ever imagined. But that wouldn't be the end. He wanted to turn his life into a real hell, to make him suffer even more than he had. When All Might offered him his power, Izuku accepted, but his training was not the same as in any other timeline. This time, it was brutal, inhumane, and directed by Maikima, who made sure his body reached its maximum potential with not a single ounce of weakness. In the UA exams, Izuku didn't just destroy the robots with overwhelming strength, but during the test, he helped several girls, Mina, Kyoka, Ibara, and Pony. And without realizing it, he won their hearts. But Izuku wasn't naive. He was clear with all of them from the start. If you're going to be with me, I want you to understand this, I won't settle for just one. I'm not forcing you to stay, but if you choose to, you must know that you will only belong to me. If you have a problem with that, you can leave now. The one with the most conflict was Ibra Shiozaki, because of her religious beliefs. However, even though Izuku was firm with his conditions, he also gave them attention, affection, and protection, making them feel loved. In the end, she too accepted. Another change in the story was that Izuku didn't give up his position as class president. He used the position to get closer to Momo Yaoyorozu, who initially rejected him. The whole UA knew about his reputation for being with multiple women, and she didn't want to get involved in that. But Izuku was persistent. He knew exactly how to enter her world, how to make her doubt, how to turn her rejection into curiosity. And deep down, it wasn't about love. It was about control. It felt good to have women who gave themselves to him without question. Momo had been a recent acquisition, though not without some challenges. At first, she had tried to resist, keeping a respectful distance. But after some persuasion from him and the other girls, she finally gave in. Izuku was no stranger to the satisfaction of watching them surrender to him, one after another. Katsuki, on the other hand, was furious. He wasn't stupid, he knew something in Izuku had changed drastically. He had tried to challenge him in combat once, but all he managed to do was end up in the UA infirmary with bruises and nearly fractured bones. All Might and Nizu had scolded Izuku, telling him he needed to control himself, but Izuku knew it was just a reminder that he was now superior. And he would keep proving it. As Izuku walked down the hallways, a scene caught his attention. From the window in a corridor on the lower floor, he saw Katsuki talking to Yui Kodai. His surprise was evident when the blonde, with a slight blush on his face, handed her a bouquet of roses. "Take it easy, Midoriya, you almost look like you want to devour my friend Yui," said a playful voice. It was the floating head of Setsuna Tokage, who quickly reconnected her neck while hugging him from behind. Izuku pushed her arm aside with an annoyed gesture. "Setsuna, what I do is none of your business." He knew he had a hunger to possess women, but he wouldn't deceive any of them. If someone interested him, he told his girls, not to ask for permission, but to keep them in the loop. "Heh, so the rumor that you hate Katsuki is true," she said with a sideways smile. Izuku didn't deny it. "Believe me, if I had to save a villain or him, I'd probably save the villain." Setsuna whistled at his response. "Wow. What did he do to make you hate him that much?" Izuku glanced at her sideways. He didn't need to hide his past. So, he told her everything, his miserable life in middle school, the arrival of a new girl, his naive love, the betrayal by Katsuki, and how they had laughed behind his back. Setsuna remained silent. She knew a betrayal like that could be painful, but the expression on Izuku's face as he told his story revealed that his suffering ran much deeper, a wound so strong it had broken him completely, turning him into someone different. To ease the tension, she wrapped her arm around Izuku's neck. "Tell me, what do I have to do to be your woman?" "I asked Pony and Ibra, but neither of them wants to say how." Izuku stared at her before responding. "Capture my interest and swear loyalty to me." She looked at him with a flirtatious smile. "Then I meet the requirements." Izuku didn't even blink when he replied. "No." The blow to her pride was immediate. Setsuna had conquered many men. She wasn't the most beautiful, but she knew her body attracted attention, though for that same reason, she had stopped trying to have boyfriends. They always ended up using her and discarding her after sleeping with her. She sighed at the answer. "Well, I guess I'll leave," she said, releasing her grip on Izuku's neck. But he looked at her with interest. "Why am I of interest to you?" She looked at him with some embarrassment before responding. "Your reputation as a womanizer is well known throughout UA, but when I asked Pony and Ibra why they were with a man who always moved from one girl to another, they told me something I wasn't expecting." She paused, her expression unreadable to Izuku. "They told me that, even though you're a pervert with a desire to be surrounded by women and sometimes seem cold, you're actually a kind person. That, although at first they hesitated to be with you, every day you showed them how much you value and love them, making them feel special, as if they were the most beautiful women in the world. They also told me that you're not just interested in their bodies or beauty, but that you really care about their well-being, like when you always take the time to help Pony with her Japanese, or when you spend nights listening to Ibra talk about her religious beliefs, even if you don't share those ideas, but you listen to her and sometimes stay the night with her while she goes on about religion, and you never complain about it. I've also heard that you go on dates with Mina, and when she wants to dance in the middle of the street, you go along with it, even if it's embarrassing. The thing is, they feel respected, not just seen as a passing pleasure. Setsuna kept talking. She didn't even realize when her eyes started filling with tears. She had had many boyfriends, but none so sweet and loving as Izuku. She turned to leave, feeling stupid for even trying, but then she felt a hand grip her firmly. "Let go of me, Midoriya," she said as she struggled, trying to regain her composure. "I can't let go right now," he replied calmly, not releasing her. Setsuna felt a shiver run down her back. She had expected him to simply let her go. But Izuku was different. He had always been different. "Why? You already told me I don't interest you," she retorted, trying to hold back the tears threatening to spill. "You're wrong about that." She quickly turned around, surprised. Her eyes met his, and she noticed something different. His gaze was still cold and calculating, but there was a flash of something else, something she struggled to recognize at first. Was it concern? "Let go of me," she whispered softly, feeling strangely vulnerable. But instead of releasing her, Izuku pulled her closer, pressing her against his chest. Without letting her go, he took out his phone and typed something into the group chat he had with his other girls. Instantly, the responses started coming in. Mina sent a sticker of a cat pouting. Momo, for her part, sent an image of a dog massaging its temples, as if it had a headache. The responses were varied, some supportive, others mocking. It was almost funny. He put the phone away and looked down at Setsuna. She looked back at him, feeling oddly nervous. "I want some of my kids to have my green hair," he said suddenly, leaning in a little closer to her. Setsuna felt her face burn. "What do you think you're saying?" she exclaimed, looking away. "You already rejected me, so there's nothing between us." Izuku smiled smugly. "You're wrong. I never rejected you. It's just that, at that moment, you didn't have my interest." She frowned. "And now I do. I haven't done anything. When you asked me if you were fit to be my woman, you did it with arrogance. You wore a mask to hide your true intentions. You hid your pain with a confident smile and disguised your tears with a rebellious attitude. But now, when I saw your true self, somehow, you reminded me of me." Setsuna felt her heart stop for a second. "Someone broken, who no longer believes in love," Izuku finished. Before she could react, he leaned in and kissed her. At first, Setsuna wanted to resist, but why? She had nothing to lose. Her arms slipped around Izuku's neck, and she deepened the kiss, surrendering completely. When they pulled away, her face was completely red, feeling an adrenaline rush she had never experienced with anyone else. With an unusual shyness for her, she murmured, "Am I your woman now?" Izuku stared at her. "Now you're mine." He extended his hand. Setsuna didn't wait any longer and embraced him, truly hoping that this time she had made the right decision. But then she felt something strange. She glanced sideways and noticed that, instead of wrapping his arms around her back affectionately, Izuku's hands were resting on her butt, subtly moving. A flicker of annoyance appeared on her eyebrow. She looked up and met his satisfied expression. She sighed. "I guess I'll have to get used to this." Then she remembered her religious friend and, with curiosity, asked, "When you do this with Ibra, how does she take it?" Izuku laughed. "Now she just blushes and sometimes shudders, but I know she likes it. Though, well, the first time I did it, I didn't expect her reaction." Flashback. "Get away, sexual demon." Ibra screamed, her face completely red with embarrassment, as she threw all her religious items at him. First, she threw holy water at him. Then, a Bible. After that, a lamp with a figure of Christ. In the end, she pointed a cross at him while whining. "Sniff, sniff. Get out of my boyfriend's body," she exclaimed, not knowing what else to do. Momo and Mina were laughing hysterically from the couch. Kyoka, though trying to stay serious, couldn't help but laugh when Ibra began praying in Hail Mary while continuing to throw objects. "Ibra, calm down," Izuku is not possessed, Pony tried to reassure her, though she could barely hold back her laughter. Izuku, still on the floor, sighed. I just wanted to hug you, he said with resignation, dodging another rosary. He completely ignored the fact that his hand had ended up on her butt, though, to be honest, he didn't regret it and would definitely do it again. End of flashback. Setsuna clutched her stomach as she laughed uncontrollably. Her tears, which had originally been from sadness, were now from laughing so hard. She wiped her eyes and took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. I knew my friend was a bit innocent, but I never thought she'd react like that, she said between laughs, looking at Izuku, who was also smiling amusedly. She's quicker than she seems when it comes to exorcising me, Izuku commented with an amused smile. They both turned their gaze to the window, where Katsuki, unusually clumsy, was saying goodbye to Yui Kodai. The scene caught their attention. Are you still going for Yui? Setsuna asked curiously. Izuku nodded with determination. I will win her heart, but... He paused, crossed his arms, and his expression became more serious. I'm not a monster, if she doesn't want anything, I won't force her. But I will tell her what kind of trash Katsuki is. With the help of the girls, especially Ibra, Pony, and Setsuna, they arranged some meetings so that Izuku and Yui could spend time together. One day, in the cafeteria, the quiet and reserved Yui was looking for a seat to eat when she saw her three friends signaling for her to come closer. Curious, she approached and noticed that Izuku was also sitting at the table. She knew about his reputation, as well as the fact that several of her friends were dating him. However, she had never judged them for it. After all, they seemed happy, and he didn't act like someone unpleasant. She sat silently and began eating. Pony, Ibara, and Setsuna's phones rang at the same time. The three exchanged glances and, with a terrible act, said in unison, we have something important to do. Yui watched them, expressionless, tilting her head. All three at the same time. Yes, they replied before quickly getting up and leaving. She blinked a couple of times before shrugging and continuing to eat. Hello, my name is Izuku Midoriya. I think this is the first time we've talked, but your friends have told me a lot about you. Yui didn't respond immediately, simply continuing to eat calmly. Izuku leaned in slightly and whispered, they told me you're afraid of chickens. Yui, who had been drinking at the time, choked and coughed slightly as her cheeks turned a light red. Cough cough. They're kind of scary, she replied calmly, not giving it too much importance. Izuku smiled and continued, you're right. I guess it's the same with your hobby of secretly taking selfies in different swimsuits. Yui's face immediately turned bright red. How? I'm sorry, Izuku hurriedly said with a smile. You know how Setsuna is, she has no filters when she talks. Yui sighed and glanced at him sideways. Don't tell anyone, she whispered, visibly embarrassed. Izuku extended his hand and showed her his pinky. Only if you let me see a photo of you. Yui's eyes widened in surprise. I promise I won't take any pictures, Izuku said with a playful tone. After hesitating for a moment, Yui sighed and brought her pinky to his to seal the promise. Then, she took out her phone and, with some embarrassment, partially covered the screen with her hand so only he could see it. Izuku leaned in closer to her and looked at the photo intently. It was a picture of Yui in a rather revealing bikini, with her hair styled differently than usual. Izuku raised an eyebrow with interest. Wow. It's... Yui started to get impatient. What? Too sexy, he replied, giving her a playful wink. Who would have thought, behind that calm look hides a perverted girl. She blushed and quickly shook her head. Baka, that's not true. Izuku let out a laugh and said, I'd love to see more, but we promised it would only be one photo. What a shame. You're really charming, you're truly beautiful. She smiled at the compliment and, without realizing it, swiped to another photo. Izuku continued to praise not only her body but also her hairstyle and the color combinations that suited her best. Yui, who had initially felt a little nervous, ended up enjoying the conversation. When the bell rang, they each went to their class. When she entered her classroom, Ibara, Pony, and Setsuna looked at her mischievously. Looks like the shy girl wants to steal our boyfriend, Setsuna said with a playful smile. Yui quickly turned red and started to stutter. And no, that's not true. I just ate with him. Pony leaned over and gave her a soft nudge. Yeah, sure. And you probably didn't get nervous when he got close to you. Ibara clasped her hands together and smiled. Love is a beautiful thing, Yui. You don't have to deny it. The blonde covered her face with both hands, feeling the heat rise in her cheeks as her friends surrounded her with teasing giggles. Setsuna, with her usual mischievous expression, gave her a light nudge. Come on, Yui-chan, it's not that bad. Admit it, Izuku made you feel special, didn't he? Pony leaned over her seat, looking at her with a curious smile. It was obvious you were enjoying the conversation with him. Ibara nodded sweetly. Sometimes, fate surprises us with unexpected feelings. You're exaggerating. Yui exclaimed, standing up abruptly, causing her friends to laugh even harder. It was just a casual chat. She shouted. Casual, huh? Setsuna repeated, raising an eyebrow. Then why are you so red? Trying to avoid the topic, Yui sat at the desk farthest from them. She needed to clear her mind and focus on something else. Like her crush, Katsuki. At dismissal time, after escaping her friends, Yui walked through the hallways looking for Katsuki. Lately, she had realized she had a certain interest in him, and although he was explosive and grumpy, he had been surprisingly polite to her. But as she searched for him, the image of Izuku praising her so sincerely came back to her mind. His expression, his tone. It was so different from Katsuki's. She shook her head, trying to push those thoughts away. She didn't want a complicated relationship, let alone a polyamorous one, she just wanted someone for herself. When she finally found him, she approached timidly and spoke in a low voice. Hi, Katsuki. The blonde took a moment to respond. Hi, Yui-chan, but his tone was tense, and she immediately noticed the frustration on his face. Is something wrong? She asked cautiously. Katsuki, who had been controlling himself to win her over, felt his patience wear thin when he remembered the scene in the cafeteria. Izuku had managed to make her laugh and blush in a way he hadn't been able to. Tell me something, why were you with that Deku? His voice was more hostile than he had intended. Yui blinked, confused. Deku. Who's Deku? The blonde gritted his teeth. Midoriya. The same guy you were smiling at earlier. Oh, him. But he's just a friend. Why does it bother you so much? She asked, trying to understand his sudden change of attitude. Katsuki's fists clenched. Because he's a damn useless idiot who always ruins my plans. For the first time, Yui felt truly uneasy. Up until that moment, Katsuki had seemed confident, even charming in his own way, but now, he looked different. I think it's better if we talk later, when you're calmer, she said, taking a step back. But Katsuki didn't let her go. He gripped her wrist tightly. You're not leaving. I like you, got it? And that's why I don't want you getting close to him. Yui shuddered. Please, let me go, and let's talk somewhere else, she asked, trying to sound calm. Katsuki gritted his teeth, his patience running out. He was used to things going the way he wanted, taking what he desired without resistance. On impulse, he pulled her toward him and tried to kiss her. But Yui reacted quickly, placing her hand on his chest to stop him. This isn't right, Katsuki. Let me go. The blonde lost his patience. With one hand, he grabbed Yui's face roughly. Listen to me, I chose you to be my woman, so be grateful that a real man is interested in you. So stop resisting. Yui's eyes widened in fear. Now she was truly scared. Feeling her heart beat fast, one thought crossed her mind, Izuku would never treat me like this. She closed her eyes in desperation as Katsuki moved closer. A tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't want her first kiss to be like this. Suddenly, a loud boom echoed through the air, and she felt her body jerk. Her heart skipped a beat when she opened her eyes and found herself protected by someone else's strong arms. She looked up, and that's when she saw the face of her savior. He was looking at her with concern in his eyes. Izuku, she murmured in surprise. Izuku held her firmly before shifting his gaze away from her and locking it onto Katsuki, whose eyes reflected pure fury. Don't ever touch her like that again, Bakugo. Midoriya's voice was low but charged with an intensity that made even Katsuki hesitate for a moment. Yui felt her heart beat faster, but this time for a completely different reason. The warmth of Izuku's arms around her was comforting. Being so close to him, feeling his protection, and seeing the annoyance in his gaze at what had just happened made her realize something. To him, she was important. She had never seen him that way before, but now, looking at him closely, a question began to swirl in her mind. Is this yearning and security what they feel? Her friends' words about him, their laughter when talking about how loved and respected they felt, the way they looked at him with affection and desire. Suddenly, everything started to make sense. Maybe, just maybe, the idea of dating Izuku wasn't so far-fetched after all. Katsuki wiped the blood from his lip with the back of his hand, glaring at Izuku. That bastard had punched him without hesitation, separating him from his woman, as if he had the right to do so. But now, seeing Yui's expression, her lingering fear, her evasive gaze, and the way she was seeking refuge in his rival's arms, he knew he had made a mistake. He swallowed his pride and took a step back, trying to regain his composure. I'm sorry, Yui. I hope you can forgive me. I just got carried away, he said in a voice that tried to sound regretful, though Izuku didn't buy a single word of it. Yui relaxed a little when she saw that Katsuki wasn't pushing the issue, but her gaze still reflected a whirlwind of emotions. Finally, Katsuki walked away, leaving behind a silence thick with tension. Thanks, Izuku, she said quietly, slowly pulling away from her protector. She lifted her gaze and met those green eyes that seemed to analyze her intently. His expression was calm, but there was something about him that made her feel intrigued. I have so many questions. And I think only you can answer them. Izuku smiled, amused by her intensity. He moved a little further away and, without warning, extended his hand with his pinky raised. Yui looked at him. What do you want? She asked, more out of curiosity than caution. Izuku smiled confidently. A date. Yui blinked, surprised. After what she had just gone through with Katsuki, she needed some peace. And maybe going out with Izuku wouldn't be such a bad idea. Her lips curled into a slight smile, and after a few brief seconds, she intertwined her pinky with his. Deal. As she had promised, he told her everything, though he didn't expect it to affect her so much. Later, in a park away from the crowd, Yui found herself hunched over a bush, her face pale and her stomach churning from vomiting. Izuku handed her a bottle of water while watching with some compassion the little animals that had fled after the scene. Ugh. I can't believe everything that bastard did, she complained, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. I warned you. But at least now you know what kind of person Katsuki is, Izuku replied with a shrug. She sighed and took a sip of water. Thank you, Izuku. If you hadn't told me this, I might have fallen for his tricks again. But now that I know what I know, there's nothing in the world that could make me see him as anything but trash. I regret not hitting him. Just remembering he tried to force a kiss makes my anger grow. Izuku gently placed his hand on Yui's head, in a surprisingly warm gesture. Don't worry about it. I'll make sure he gets what he deserves, he said with a calm smile. Yui felt the warmth of his palm, and for a moment, she allowed herself to relax. However, curiosity soon overwhelmed her. Izuku. Why go through so much trouble for him? There's something else you haven't told me, right? Izuku lowered his hand and looked at her seriously. You're right. There's more, he admitted, his expression becoming more serious. I wanted to make you my woman to provoke him. I knew that would make him explode. Yui blinked several times. Her heart skipped a beat at hearing those words. So, does that mean you used me too? She asked in a whisper, unsure whether to feel hurt or angry. Izuku sighed and looked away. At first, yes. But now, his voice softened. Now, I'm not so sure. His eyes met hers again, and there was a palpable honesty in them. But believe me, I would never have forced you into anything. If you hadn't agreed to be my woman, I would have just warned you about the kind of person Katsuki is. Yui lowered her gaze. Her heart was pounding, but no longer out of fear or anger. Something inside her told her that her life would be much better by his side. With a soft gesture, she held his hand, and her face turned red as she realized what she was doing. With a quiet voice, she asked curiously, So, what am I supposed to do to be your girlfriend? Izuku looked at her, surprised by her question, and after a moment of silence, let out a genuine laugh. There was no mockery in his expression, just pure, sincere amusement. Yui puffed out her cheeks in a slight pout. "Don't make fun of me. I'm serious," she protested, feeling more embarrassed. But before she could say anything else, her eyes widened when she felt Izuku's lips on hers. Her first kiss. At first, her mind went blank, but instead of pulling away, she ended up leaning in closer. When they separated, Yui's face was completely flushed, and she could barely form words. Izuku, for his part, smiled with a sense of satisfaction. "Now you're my woman," he said with confidence. Yui stammered a little before regaining her composure. "You better not make me regret this decision," she said with a fierce look, although her face was still burning with emotion. Izuku smiled and gently squeezed her hand. "I will make you happy, Yui. I swear," he said with conviction. The days passed, and as he had promised, Izuku was always by her side. Sometimes, he would wait for her at the classroom door, other times, he would surprise her with small gestures, like a cold drink after practice. Yui grew used to his presence, to the point where it felt natural for him to wrap his arm around her when they walked together. Their relationship became the center of attention at school, and although some whispered about how unexpected it was to see them together, she didn't mind. But for Katsuki, it was daily torture. Every time he saw them, he felt his pride shatter. He watched how Yui laughed with Izuku, how they took selfies together, how she leaned on his shoulder with ease. The worst part was that Izuku seemed to enjoy every moment with Yui, as if he knew that her happiness only reminded him of his own failure to get what he wanted. A week later, things took an unexpected turn. Katsuki slammed his locker open to grab some things, but inside, he found a letter. He picked it up curiously, and after reading it, a smug smile appeared on his face. "See, Deku, in the end, women will always choose me," he muttered with satisfaction, dropping the letter to the ground as he walked away confidently. The message was from Yui, asking him to meet her in her room. His heart raced, the anger he had felt over the past days vanished in an instant. Finally, she had come to her senses. He couldn't wait any longer. His mind was filled with images of what he would do with her, how he would finally prove who the best was. When he reached her room door, his impatience was evident. He knocked confidently and exhaled with a smug smile. "Here I am, woman. Your man has arrived," he announced arrogantly. But in his excitement, he didn't notice someone behind him. "How stupid you are," was the last thing he heard before feeling a sharp blow to the back of his neck. Everything went dark. When Katsuki began to open his eyes, his head ached, and his vision was blurry. The world spun around him. He tried to move his arms, but something held him back. As his vision cleared, his breathing became erratic, he was tied to a chair. His whole body tensed. Worry flooded him as he heard a strange noise in the room. He turned his head as best as he could, and what he saw made his eyes widen with horror and anger. "You! Damn bastard!" Katsuki roared, trying to get up, but the pressure on his wrists kept him firmly bound to the chair. In front of him, Yui was in Izuku's arms. She was naked and was giving herself to the one person he hated most in his life. He saw her blush and heard her moan as Izuku penetrated her. After a few minutes, her expression shifted into a crooked smile as Izuku rammed her with more speed. All of this happened while they were completely indifferent to the fury burning in his eyes. She even had the nerve to look at him and smile while riding Izuku's cock. It was humiliating, and it was something he never saw coming. He wanted to make her his, but in the end, it was Izuku who won. Izuku turned slightly, with an expression of utter superiority. "Mientras sujetaba la cintura de Yui y la movia arriba y abajo para aumentar el placer mientras seguía embistiéndola." "Calm down, Katsuki. We're just enjoying the moment. Didn't you want to see her happy?" Katsuki gritted his teeth in anger, but his strength was useless. He could only watch. And every minute that passed, that blind fury turned into something worse, helplessness. The hours dragged slowly for him. Every smile, every exchanged glance between Yui and Izuku was a direct blow to his pride. Everything he had tried to build with her was crumbling in front of him, and they both mocked his misery. Finally, Katsuki lowered his head, his body losing all traces of resistance. "I get it, nerd. Just get me out of here, he muttered, unwilling to keep watching the woman he loved be with another man. Izuku tilted his head, studying him with a thoughtful expression before letting out a small laugh. Tisk, tsk. Katsuki, Katsuki. I didn't think you'd give up so quickly. He walked up to him, leaning down to meet his level. I thought you'd have more resistance. The room, which belonged to Momo, was spacious and elegantly decorated. Just as Yui collapsed onto the bed, exhausted from pleasure, the door opened, and the other girls of Izuku entered. Katsuki felt his throat dry up as he watched the scene. In front of his eyes, the damn nerd was having a good time with each of the girls, and each one of them didn't hold back their laughter of pleasure, making him feel like the most useless man on the planet. His rage increased until his body could no longer handle it. Tears of anger welled up in his eyes, and everything around him started spinning. Before he could react, his vision blurred, and the world went dark. Izuku watched with silent satisfaction as Katsuki convulsed from humiliation and emotional exhaustion. With a triumphant smile, he took out his phone and captured the moment. A nice memory for posterity. Maikima approached him with an intriguing smile. Tell me, do you feel better now? Izuku grabbed her firmly by the waist, pulling her toward him. There's just one more thing to make me feel completely satisfied. He leaned in and kissed her calmly before whispering in her ear, I want to fuck his mother. Maikima smiled with evident delight as the other girls in the room looked at him with a mix of surprise and uncertainty. Momo frowned. Honey, do you think that's right? Ibara, with her angelic aura that contrasted with her naked, sweaty body, gave him a calm look. Remember, hate breeds more hate. Setsuna, on the other hand, laughed amusedly. I do want a MILF in our harem. Izuku listened to them carefully and then gave a reassuring smile. After this, I promise to give you all the attention you deserve. The girls seemed excited at his promise, but he added something else in a lower, more thoughtful voice. And it's not just for revenge. I feel like Mitsuki is unhappy with the life she's living. If she wants, I'll make her happy by my side. Days passed, and although Katsuki tried to hide it, something inside him had changed. He couldn't look at Izuku without his body tensing from contained anger and suffocating resentment. He avoided looking at him for too long and avoided any situation where they might exchange words. But the worst part was that, deep down, he knew he had lost. When the end of the month came, he decided to visit his mother. Mitsuki had told him that she was divorcing his father, but he didn't really care too much. He had never felt a strong connection to his father, and if his mother wanted to leave him, she could do whatever she wanted. When he arrived at the house, he rang the doorbell impatiently. Mom, open up, it's me. From the other side of the door, he could hear his mother shouting that she was coming. When the door opened, Katsuki frowned when he saw her appearance. Her hair was a bit messy, but what caught his attention most was the big smile on her face. Oh, sweetheart, you're here. Come in, come in. He entered the house, but his bad feeling grew when he felt the air heavy with a scent he could recognize. It was the smell of sex. He frowned and looked at his mother with distrust. Mom, tell me you're not bringing guys into the house this quickly. Mitsuki laughed and waved her hand in a carefree gesture. You're wrong, it's just one. And it's the best thing I've ever done in my life. Unlike your father and you, he treats me like the queen I am. Katsuki shrugged, not giving it much importance. Is the food ready? I'm hungry. His mother changed her expression. She crossed her arms and stared at him intently. That look, full of determination, took him by surprise. This is what I was talking about. You always expect me to do everything, but tell me, Katsuki, when was the last time you told me you loved me? When was the last time you cared about how I felt? He scoffed and slumped into the chair. Mom, don't start with your lectures. Just give me the food. Mitsuki let out a sarcastic laugh and turned on her heels. If you're so hungry, you should thank my partner. He made the food. Katsuki rolled his eyes. Ha! Who would be the idiot brave enough to date an old hag like you? At least I have to give him credit, he knows how to cook. He didn't expect that, the next second, footsteps would echo down the stairs. He looked up, and when he saw who was coming down, his world stopped. Izuku, wearing only black boxers, stretched lazily as he descended the stairs. His smile was almost lazy, but there was a gleam of mockery in his eyes. Baby, when are you coming up? I still have energy. Mitsuki laughed and walked toward him with a carefree stride. Era, it seems like, after what happened last night, someone still has some energy. Katsuki's face turned completely red, but not out of embarrassment, rather, pure disbelief and rage. You bastard. Izuku rested an elbow on the railing and looked at him with a confident smile. Hey, son. The sound of Katsuki's cup hitting the floor seemed to mark the moment when his sanity cracked. He couldn't hear anything else after that, just the roar of his own heart pounding with fury as Mitsuki disappeared down the hallway, laughing softly. Moments later, his mother's joyful screams echoed through the house. They were cries of pleasure from spending time with the man she loved. Katsuki put his hands on his head, covering his ears tightly as he gritted his teeth. A suffocating feeling, as if he were trapped in a nightmare, enveloped him. No. This can't be happening, he yelled before running out of the house. From the window, Mitsuki and Izuku watched him with mocking expressions. I hope the son you give me doesn't end up being like that piece of trash I have as a son, Mitsuki sneered with a cruel laugh. Several years later, Izuku achieved what he had always dreamed of. He became the greatest and strongest hero in history, not just in Japan, but the entire world. Since his youth, during his days at UA he repeatedly showed that he was an up-and-coming prodigy, defeating legendary villains like Muscular, Shigaraki, and Dabi. However, his fiercest battle was against All for One, a fight that stretched into the dawn. In the final moments of the battle, with his body covered in wounds and burns, Izuku stood tall, raising his fist in a triumphant pose that reminded everyone of his mentor, All Might. The cameras captured the image of a new symbol of peace. The entire world celebrated his victory. The media dubbed him the Invincible Deku. His legend was forged at that moment, and it only continued to grow. With his fortune secured and the support of his partner Momo Yaoyorozu, Izuku invested in building a magnificent mansion. It wasn't just a house, but a palace where he and his wives lived with their many children. Every room was designed to offer luxury and comfort, with expansive gardens, pools, private gyms, and countless amenities. Life in the mansion was a chaotic one, filled with laughter. Izuku's children ran through the halls while their mothers returned from a delightful trip with him. However, only one of his wives stayed behind to look after the children, allowing the others to enjoy some intimate time with their husband. Maikima, who insisted on sitting on a throne purely for the sake of eccentricity, finished recounting Izuku's story to the children gathered in the grand hall. Her own children, Power Midoriya and Denji Midoriya, looked at her with awe, while the other children simply ran around, ignoring her, turning the place into a battlefield of childlike chaos. Momo, Pony, Ibara, and the other women exchanged resigned glances. I think next time we ask Mirko to watch over them, at least they listen to her. Maikima simply smiled with an air of superiority. She knew she couldn't control all the children, but she was content with her twins being the most attentive. She gently stroked them, enjoying the moment. Although her original plan had been to use Izuku to live comfortably, over time she developed genuine feelings for him and for their children. She couldn't deny that, in some way, this chaotic family had made her happy. Suddenly, her phone vibrated, and a malicious smile formed on her lips. The other women felt a chill. Over the years, they had gotten used to her presence, and they knew that when she smiled like that, something had gone exactly the way she wanted. Ibara, in a whisper, clasped her hands together in prayer. May the poor soul find its way to heaven. If it deserves it. On Makima's phone screen, a news headline caught attention. A man had been arrested after a failed robbery at a store. The image showed an aged Katsuki Bakugo, with deep bags under his eyes and a face marked by failure. He hadn't finished his studies at UA, hadn't become a hero, and his temperament and pride led him down an irreversible path. Maikima smiled mockingly and pulled a bell from her belt, giving it a soft jingle. Seconds later, a woman dressed in a maid's uniform and a white mask entered the room without saying a word. We're heading out for a while. Leave everything clean. Understood? The woman nodded silently. Each mother took their children, ready to spend the afternoon at the park. Maikima was the last to leave, but before closing the door, she stopped and looked at the maid, who was beginning to clean the room. Don't worry, I'll bring you a little souvenir, Nozomi. Her voice carried a restrained cruelty as she closed the door behind her. Nozomi stood still, holding a rag in her hands. Her eyes scanned the luxurious room around her, and a bitter emptiness settled in her chest. She had once dreamed of a different future, of a home she could call her own. But now, she was nothing more than a shadow in the lives of others, a specter trapped in the monotony of cleaning a house that could have been hers. But that, through her own stupidity, she had lost. The end of the story. Before finishing the video, remember that videos in English will have this logo in the corner, so you'll know the theory is in English. I have several theories to translate, so support this video to keep translating the rest. On the right side, the last translated theory will be appearing.